So this property was recently purchased. They used an independent damp and timber specialist, Jeff Eaton. I don't know him, but I'm sure he's great. And the really positive thing is he didn't recommend rising damp proofing treatment despite there being damp at the base of the wall. So big plus. This is a summary of his findings. It was quite a dense report, but I think he caught everything. I wouldn't necessarily have done some of the things that he suggested, but by and large, it was on the money. So well done, Jeff. Here's the survey. Have a read and have a listen, and I'll speak at the end, looking at the data loggers and my recommendations. So where you've got mould, you've got excess vapour, for sure, exacerbated by heat loss and poor air movement. So you've got restricted air movement naturally into a bay because you've got corners and eddies and so on. The plants, A, aren't going to help with the air movement, and B, every drop of water that you put into a plant is going to come back out as vapour. So you're going to get an area of vapour. You've got increased heat loss both at the base of the wall and into the corners. And so you've got extra vulnerability. So the solution should come from monitoring vapour and reducing it, managing it. And you might think about putting insulation in, you might think about increasing the airflow, and possibly even increasing the gap by a few inches is going to improve between the plants and so you got air movement. So I went to a property where I surveyed for the clients before they purchased, and then they had me back, and they bought a lovely big DFAS sofa that just consumes the whole room. You can have a look on it, it'll be on one of the videos, and it's stopping heat from getting from the radiator to the wall, and vapor moves through diffusion, whereas heat moves through current. So you get all the vapor and none of the heat. So you get a build up of humidity on the wall. Mould only grows where relative humidity goes above 85% for long periods of time. But the key solutions are to remove the vapour by ventilation, dehumidification, think about airflow, think about insulation, and monitoring, and think about what happens not just during your normal living, but when you're not here. If you're going away for long periods of time, you really should have a dehumidifier running. It's much cheaper way, much lower carbon footprint. The other thing is mould spores are omnipresent everywhere in the world, but you'll have a much higher concentration of mould spores where it's starting to grow already. So you want to just get rid of it, and I would recommend using HG anti-mould foam. There are plenty of brands out, but my experience is that it works.
Yeah, we use that actually. There's some condensation in the back bedroom, and that's something similar, and it's come off, and it hasn't come back yet in a week.
So I'll have a good look at that element, and then I'll have a look at the render, the pros and cons of the render. I'll do a piece on that, and really look under the floor and so on. I can see there's a lot to look at and consider.
Yeah.
So, do you have data loggers?
Yeah, Ben's done them.
Let's have a look at that and calibrate them now. So I'll just put a number on this and drop it into the container repossessions. But so there's damp here.
I mean, that literally feels wet.
Yeah, but that's condensation, right? Yeah. I was expecting to see hygroscopic soils, but they're normally about this level on there. And I suppose you may have some exercise.
Yes, and I think that was blocked. I think Minister Graham knocked that out. And it does seem to be the sort of footprint of the old fireplace, wouldn't it?
So I'll put this down. You've got mould there. So where you've got mould, you've got excess vapour, and I would say it's not going to be so much. It's going to be the past occupancy, and what happens as people get older. I'm going to be careful what I say because we're always getting older.
I know exactly what you're going to say. I think,
but they Well, they're probably so damp creeps up, if you like the terminology, on people over time. You sort of just become used to it and you just ignore it. People will tend to. I'm not going to go into the last stages of life but people aren't nearly as good. They're worried about heat. They will do everything to draft proof the place up. They won't use ventilation. They won't concern themselves about vapour removal. They'll just concern themselves about heat. That's the big thing that people notice as they're getting older, is the heat loss. And yet, because of the energy crisis, they'll end up only heating one room, or the room that they're living in, and not the rest of the property, and you'll end up getting the vapour from the room that you're living in will just transfer into the cold wall of the place that isn't being heated, and you get these huge, great issues associated with that. Things like drying clothes internally and so on. You know, all of those things are made worse. And as you're getting older, you're less able to make the changes that younger people would do. So probate properties often suffer from damp issues.
That's the one thing he didn't do. And,
So what I'm going to recommend with this is, on the face of it, it looks like condensation, but you could have hygroscopic salts here. They're very common in these areas. You've got this sort of asbestos-y type plaster on
yeah,
top.
that's the worry, isn't it? Back in the time they put this on.
Yeah.
Asbestos got mixed into it, didn't it?
Depends on how much you want to spend on it, but you could dry line it and basically hide it behind here, and
What does dry line entail?
put some insulation. Well, basically plasterboard and battens, and it means that you wouldn't see it. It's not getting rid of the problem, but not in your tenure. I mean, I don't know if it is asbestos, but it may be worth getting a chemical sample. It would cost money to do that. But then otherwise you'll find that people will refuse to, decorators will refuse to take it off the wall because, it's potentially dangerous. So if you had it, you could go down two routes, have it analysed, but you've got the whole room here and ceiling, lovely, Artex, I guess.
Yeah, I think so.
Or you could block it up. I mean, there's still a bit of a risk, but the risk is relatively minimal, and you can adhere plasterboard to it.
And we have some grotty stuff in our walls. We just plastered over it.
Well, there you go.
So, what do you think is likely to have caused that? You say condensation.
You can just to say you can plaster over it as well. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
But what a lot of people will do is dry lining, because it's essentially going to provide the same depth as plaster will do. But you're basically putting plasterboard with adhesion, and what you want to do is use an oil base or plastic based adhesion rather than aqueous adhesion. And I would say, from a speed point of view, it'll generally be faster than plastering over it, but I mean, it could be skin plastered, yeah.
And you couldn't get the fireplace back out?
Oh, you could do, yeah. You could open it up. But what I'm saying is that these, I think there's a good chance that you've got some hygroscopic salts in these. And the reason why I think that is because of the location of it. And even though you're going to get a certain degree of heat loss in the centre of the fireplace, because you've got a void that's open to the outside, the way it's displayed here looks like hygroscopic salts, and these are salts that are are released by the burning of coal. They're hygroscopic, so just like salt and water is hygroscopic, and that's the 75% relative humidity. The most common one is calcium nitrate. You can see lots of surveys that I've done where I've got it on video, and they will will remain on the wall and they'll pass through any aqueous surface that is in contact. So if you plaster straight on top of them, it'll just come through it. That's why it's better to have plasterboard. Or you can, I'll show you. Something that I called space therm. It's about the same thickness as normal plasterboard, and it's got insulation. So the benefit of that is that you've got insulation on it, and so if you're doing the outside, you might want to do that. Although you don't have the risk on the outside, but you might want to insulate it anyway, especially in the corner.
And those salts would make it, because you know it's like dripping, particularly here was really, but that would make it that wet. Maybe it's like this, but at times it's like dripping, basically dripping wet.
Dripping off the. You can see actually water forming on it.
Yeah, and we've like peeled. With the other side, we peeled all the plaster off because it was a bit.
So that's less common in winter. It's more of a summer issue to have dripping walls from hygroscopic salts. I think what you need to do in the first instance is to dry the place out by. You've got a dehumidifier. What is it? Do you know its capacity?
25 litres.
Okay, per day capacity. I'll have a look anyway. Run that, run a fan, use the data loggers, and I'll have a look at those shortly anyway. And just make sure that you've got no actual normal condensation there. So hygroscopic salts cause what's called deliquescence, which is a form of condensation, but at lower levels of relative humidity. Normal condensation is 100%. Deliquescence is anything below 100%, but normal table salt is 75%, calcium nitrate is 50%, and it's very rare that you're ever going to be below 50%. And the times that you see them at their worst is in the summertime, when you've got really warm weather, but it's picking up lots of humidity during the day, and at night when it gets a bit colder, you get all that humidity in the air, and it causes, walls can literally look like they're dribbling with moisture in the summertime from hygroscopic salts, the worst case. But that's what it looks like. But it's unusual to have it at the base of the wall. There's normally about a metre up. You're just talking about how much condensation you get on this window. And obviously if you get condensation, you can see mould down there as well. I mean, to start with, this is a single glazed window with metal frame, so it's always going to be at risk of condensation, particularly the cold weather we've had recently. However, it illustrates to me that your internal vapour levels are way too high. You need to follow what's called Dew's law, which is where you keep internal vapour below the outside temperature as measured by dew point, and you can see it on the data loggers, and I'll show you. I do an analysis of your. Well, I'll finish that in a sec.
Okay.
That point. So despite all the look of the damage rendered to the front, I'm actually not seeing brown stains, which is the telltale sign of penetrating damp. Sometimes what you have is the external brick becomes damp because of the damage render, and then a damp brick is a poor insulator, so you end up getting heat loss, which exacerbates the effects of excess vapour. But it's the excess vapour that's the problem, rather than the heat loss from the bricks. And you have to deal with that first by following Dew's law, bringing the internal vapour as measured by dew point below the outside temperature, and use ventilation, dehumidification. And you just bought the property, so the ventilation probably isn't great. It's probably relatively old and inefficient. I'll have a look at that. I don't think the bathroom fan remained on, did it, after you switched the lights off?
No.
And it should remain on for about half an hour, because about 90% of the vapour remains in the bathroom after you've switched the light out and walked off. So you want to just keep that running, and I'll show you tips and tricks with the kitchen. So you want to deal with that. And what do you do for drying clothes in winter?
We've got a heated dryer.
So that's the worst type of drying. It's the fastest way of moving vapour from damp clothes to a cold wall. So I would recommend having a dehumidifier next to the dryer.
Yeah, I've been trying to do that. We've only had it a week.
I'll have a good look at it. What, the heated dryer or the
The dehumidifier we just got around
okay.
Christmas.
Okay.
But I have put it next to it, and that's stopped the condensation in that room.
Until you deal with the condensation, you won't know the extent of the hygroscopic salts. And it could be that these all dry out. You've got to remember that this is not only cold from being an open void, but it's linked to the cold subfloor void. So the subfloor is going to have the temperature of the outside, more or less.
Mm-hmm.
So it's a particular zone at risk of dampness, but you wouldn't normally get it this level unless you had hygroscopic salts, and that's what I think they've got it in it. But I'll have a better look at it. I'm going to also try and understand whether you've got any dampness in the subfloor void, because that looks a bit of a risk.
Next doors, you say they had a massive damp problem when they moved in. And like I don't know whether they moved in after an old person or what had happened. But they appear to have put in an injected damp-proof course.
Don't do that.
Which appears that they
That
think
hides the problem. It doesn't deal with
doesn't deal with it. Okay.
And actually, it can affect your side as well. There are plenty of properties I've been to where somebody injecting into a party wall causes damp in the neighbouring property. Legally, you're not allowed to, because you have to have a party wall agreement to inject into a party wall.
Mm-hmm.
But it's very difficult to take somebody to court for damp proofing treatment where they shouldn't be, or without using party wall agreement. But you can do theoretically. It's also you would have a case, even though it's I'm not a lawyer, so don't let me go down that route. I'll just show it in terms of that, and then we'll have a look at the property itself. But mould only grows where relative humidity goes above 85% for long periods of time, sort of 6 to 8 hours. It tends to form at night when people have had all their showering, their cooking, perhaps started to dry clothes, and all that vapour, and yet then they turn the heat off or down, and outside it starts to get cold, so the surface temperature goes down. Now, relative humidity is a measure of the amount that air can hold. I'll start again. Surface relative humidity is a measure of air's capacity to hold moisture. The warmer it is, the more moisture you can hold. So in the summer you can hold a lot more moisture, but as it gets cold at night, so the air can no longer hold as much vapour. You may have the same vapour but less temperature, lower temperature, and so the relative humidity goes up until it reaches what's called the dew point, which is the temperature where condensation forms, and that's where you get dew on the ground outside, hence the name. It's also a measure of the amount of vapour in air. That is why you can use dew point and dew point differentials to look at the relative amount of vapour between one room and another room, between the inside and the outside, between the inside and the subfloor void. You can use it as a way of determining whether vapour has been generated in one zone compared to another, or indeed whether vapour is condensing in one zone relative to another. So it's fantastic for detecting dampness and solving damp problems. And that's why I get everyone to use data loggers. So the reason that you're getting vapour, mould in specific areas is for two reasons. The primary reason is the vapour. The secondary reason is the heat loss, or the heat of the wall. And a wall will be cold because either it's some form of thermal bridge where you're getting heat loss to the outside, corners of thermal bridge, chimney breasts tend to be, or it's not getting the heat from the inside, and that's perhaps because of poor airflow. So corners, you're going to get less airflow because the air can't move around so easily, it gets blocked, and also you get things like plants and objects up against walls and behind cupboards. And if you look at all the surveys I do, you'll find that the most common place to find mould is in cupboards, at the top of walls, at the base of walls, around the reveals, because you've got poor insulation around the reveals. The thickness of the brick around the window. So the reveal is the area between the window and the inside or doorway, and that you've got poor airflow and you've got reduced thickness of brick, and so you've got lots of heat loss there.
Yeah, I think that's a problem, isn't it? On the outside, the way the windows isn't that attached to the wall, so there's a gap, and then I think that's causing water to come in.
Well, I'll have a look at that, but that would be penetrating damp if rainwater's coming in. But so
maybe that one's an outside wall at the back, so maybe.
Yeah, well, I'll have a look at it. I'll have a look specifically at the different areas and explain why it is. But the most important thing is to deal with the vapour.
Okay.
But I assume if you had things like penetrating damp at the back, it's likely to increase the amount of vapour in the house.
Marginally, though, I would say penetrating damp, except in extreme circumstances such as like a void, where it's trapping it into a small area, it's only adding marginal vapour. It's internal occupancies that's adding the most. So a damp wall will add about the same amount as a wet t-shirt, but humans will generate roughly 2 litres of vapour per person per day. 3/4 from breathing. So there was a massive increase in mould and condensation from COVID, because people were working indoors and so on. As you get older, you spend more time at home, so therefore there's more vapour. And when you have babies, you'll find there's a massive increase in mould and condensation when you have babies, because you're spending time at home and more washing clothes and so on, and boiling water for lots of different reasons. And then so 3/4 litre from respiration, and plants respire, so do dogs and pets. 1/2 litre from each shower. So if you're having 2 a day, that adds up. 1/2 litre from drying clothes. So that's 1/2 litre of water that becomes vapour. And then 1/4 litre roughly per person per day from cooking, but then that depends a lot on cooking styles. That's just an average, but if you boil pasta in an open top pan, then there'll be a lot of vapour release from that. So I would reduce vapour production by cooking with tops and pots and pans, and you can turn the heat down as well.
Okay.
But I'll look more specifically at the different areas. So this is Miko. Things that I find interesting about it is I think noise level is really important, because if it's noisy, people aren't going to use it. I think the HEPA is good, because you want to take out filter things like mould. The extraction rate is presumably based on high humidity, high temperature. So it's typically 28 or 30 degrees centigrade and 80% relative humidity. Clean the filter once every 2 weeks. Interesting. Empty the water tank when full. I would use a drip. I'd use it when you go away on holiday and have it dripping out of a drain, and then normal use, just decant it once a day.
Okay.
That's what I do. First thing in the morning, just have it. So we're going into the summer, and we just got some air brick there, so that you can see light through that. That's good, but it looks humid here. Oh, you got woodworm. That's frass that you're seeing, and it's that collecting in the spider's web. Suggests that it's ongoing. It's all the way along there. So what you want is permethrin, and you want a few cycles of it, and ideally to paint it so that you can see that it's stopped. You get it in these sort of conditions. I'll show you some product information on it. So when you get humidity in the subfloor void. Let's see if I can. Condensation can form above the damp-proof course, and actually it feels wet above the damp-proof course. It feels wet there, and it can cause rising damp-like symptoms. It's not rising damp. So somebody asked me in the comments about testing for mains leaks, and this is an example where we've got a
Just open the door on the
He's turned it off, yeah. Okay, so I could see that there was water moving. There's a digital, there's an analog dial, and the good thing is that
Stop moving.
it's moving now. So it's now stopped, and I'm confident there's no leak. Let's have a look at the drains. Oh, that doesn't look good. Oh, that's. Oh, well, there you go. That's number one problem.
There's soap away there. We have soap away.
Well, it should be a drain to the public drain system. Right. Well, that should. Well, I would have thought that would have been the first thing that the CCTV person would have checked.
Clearly didn't.
Clearly didn't. Well, that may be your problem.
That could be a problem here, couldn't it?
Well, but the whole subfloor, because if you've got a leak in one place, it's just going to move through vapour to another place. Also, I looked at your neighbour's side before coming, and they have the similar issue. I'll have an investigation. I'll investigate even. While I'm out here, you've got a few cracks that need looking at. And I agree, I think, we were talking about the wall, the outside wall on your neighbour's side, and I think they've done a pretty good job. Basically, brick wall is better than render, because any cracks you get in the render, and water will get in through the cracks, like here, although it's fairly sheltered, but in here you can't see behind the paint, but and it will stop the water from evaporating out. So a brick wall is better, and it looks better. We'll talk about cement versus lime pointing. Personally, I don't have a big issue when it comes to brick walls, but if it's stone wall, I would do a lime render. The reason why is you get a lot of diffusion of water through the brick. It's evenly diffused, and I don't really see a problem. The problem with lime is not very many people use it anymore. So we're looking in behind, and there's a bit of a gap there. I would encourage you to put in a fillet of cement to stop that. And there's a bit of rot there. It's wood rot. It's not a big deal. Sorry, it's window rot. It's not a big deal. You've got a bit of a render crack there, not a major one. Not a major one, but it's to be aware of. And your neighbours have paint on their walls, which isn't great either, for similar reasons. Keep an eye on the outside when it's raining. I'll check every 6 months during a rainstorm. I'm going to just... So you've had your drains checked, and there was a leak and they're drying out. Any gaps like that you should really fill. Interesting. Yeah, so the water is naturally going to just go down to there, so it should be fine. But a fillet of cement between the patio and the render, and fill any gaps in the render with an acrylic base caulk. External one. Any timber you will need to just check, and really if you've got rot, you want to let it dry out as much as possible. Use hardener, what's called 2-pack, which is epoxy resin, I think, and then paint it to protect it. We're talking about what this patch here.
Yeah, and like it goes all the way around. If you step back, you can kind of see it more, but it goes all the way. Like in that corner, there's some bits.
So generally you're getting this. I don't know when it was put up, but if it was put up, I mean it's odd, but so it looks like soot,
Oh, yeah.
and it looks like, and soot is attracted to damp walls. I mean historically it's not a modern day thing, but it may have been something as simple as having plants growing there.
Right, okay.
And or it may, there could be a lot of reasons for it, but it doesn't strike me as being because of water, because you wouldn't naturally have water there compared to over there. I wonder whether it's plants or it's been cleaned or something. There's a crack there that needs to be dealt with.
Because this is a render, isn't it?
It's a
you'd
render.
Hope there'd be bricks like that underneath.
Well, like over there.
Yeah.
Well, there would be, and unless it's bomb damage, but you don't know. But there are a lot of reasons why people put render up. Painting is the worst thing. A render's just one bit, not as bad as paint.
Really?
Well, the reason why paint is that you can see it on your neighbour's property. Don't necessarily need to talk too much about your neighbour's property, but what happens with paint is that water gets in behind the paint. It causes blistering from essentially calcium sulfate salts crystallizing underneath the paint. You get micro cracking, you get lots of water coming in over a large zone, and it creates heat loss and eventually penetrating down. Talking about French drains, don't use a French drain. If you are going to do a drain, it's called Acco, which is a brand name, but it's just basically a plastic or metal drain around the outside, and it takes water through to the drain, and you don't want it to sit at the base of the wall covered with shingles, because that will increase the amount of dampness in walls. So you're getting mould.
Yeah, and it's all round. We cleaned it off, but it was
By the passive vent, and the reason that you get it mould by the passive,
Oh, sorry.
sorry about that, is you got, well in this case you got a curtain. So actually, funnily enough, what it is probably is much to do with the vapour coming from the outside, because if when it's raining outside, the vapour will be at 100% relative humidity, or the relative humidity will be, and it can get trapped up against the wall by the curtain, and it's perfect conditions for growing mould. And it's obviously, oh, you got condensation running down there, condensation dribble marks, and well, I know kitchen extractor fan, so that's one of your issues. Do you see when you put that on? Oh, it's not even going on. But, oh, there we go. It's just coming out. You can feel it with your hand. Doing nothing. It's just recycling.
You just throw it round, isn't it?
Yeah. I would put one in myself. I mean, you've got a chimney breast, so you can go up the chimney breast, but actually it's better to go straight out. But you may be thinking of remodelling the house and build it into it. So basically what I would do in the short term is keep the door closed. If it's really steamy, put the window open, maybe run a dehumidifier in here, and cook with tops and pots and pans, and turn the temperature down on the hob. So why you get it here is because because it gets trapped behind the door.
Oh, right.
And you get the humidity build up, and it's sort of a common place to have it. And mould in particular, but also condensation as well. Even though it's just next to the radiator, it won't get much heat there because of the way the radiator pushes air up, and this whole area might end up not being particularly well heated. You'll get mould here because you get a lot of heat loss. These are sort of 1970s, 80s type windows, double glazed windows, and they're metal framed, and you get heat loss in the metal, and so that's why you get it here. But I mean, I think you're doing the right thing. Just spray with HG anti-mould spray, and that'll do. So you're getting it there as well.
Oh yeah, and behind the sink, but maybe that's the sink's blocking it. But like my mum was cleaning behind that corner is all got black mould behind it.
But ultimately, when you're getting mould, it's because you got excess vapour made worse by heat loss.
Okay.
Bathrooms, I recommend that you always keep the door closed in the bathroom
Yeah.
with the fan going. And if any surface in any room is going to have mould, you'd rather it be in the bathroom and you know what it is and you spray it and you get rid of it than to be elsewhere in the property.
Okay.
So up there, well, that's classic, yeah. I'll show you with the thermal imaging camera, but it's a classic zone.
And then, yeah, I mean, we tried to not put it too close, but all along this wall as well. I didn't, yeah.
I mean, it's worth moving the wall away, the bed away from the wall, but you know, that's not the root cause. The root cause is the vapour.
Okay.
But I'll get a thermal imaging camera actually. With wallpaper, you quite often get mould in behind, and that's because it's reducing the airflow,
yes,
and it's keeping it up against the wall. It can also be marginally hygroscopic, which we were talking about hygroscopic. So it can, if it's like leather and plastic, you know how leather and plastic will often get mould on them.
Yeah, that's what happened here. Yeah.
That's because they're marginally hygroscopic. So it will bring it will increase the surface relative humidity marginally by like a couple of degrees, but then that becomes the first place it starts to grow. But I mean, I would just glue it up if I were you.
Oh yeah, you don't think it would make a difference if we...
And if this were my place, I'm not a big fan of this type of thing anyway. I might use rock wool thermal insulating lining paper in place of this, and it will give you a little bit of insulation, a little bit extra.
Yeah, that sounds...
Looks like it's, well, that's newish plaster, and that's where the damp zone is there. And it's often when replastering a property that you cause hygroscopic salts to move because you're putting on wet plaster, and it dissolves them and moves them to the new plaster. Yeah. But so you were asking me, you were saying that you can never get rid of these salts unless you remove the bricks, which you're obviously not going to do. Okay. And even then, they're going to be deep within it. Historically, they did use things like pumice and lime, but I'm not convinced they're the best way of dealing with it. It's so easy to use an oil-based primer. So Zinza cover stain being an example, and a few coats, and you want to go more than 300. You want to go 300 ml from that. But the benefit of that is you're only affecting the breathability of the wall for one small zone, so it's not really affecting the whole wall. Whereas if you're replacing with slurry, which is effectively doing the same thing, you're covering the whole wall with it, and so you're really affecting the breathability. And it's so inexpensive to do that you can do it every time it comes back again. You just do it.
Okay.
And also, it's really important to understand and know that it's just a decorative spoiling rather than a source of moisture. It's not ever going to cause mould, rot, woodworm, or anything like that. It's just decorative. You don't need to do anything. It's no worse than a grease stain.
Oh gosh, okay. I thought that was really like damaging to your health.
No, not at all.
Okay.
I mean, mould, well, it's actually dust mites are the main concern.
Yeah.
Oh, and your point, your issue, your concern should be rot, woodworm, and to an extent mould, but it's less the mould, it's more what the mould tells you, and you get dust mites in the same environment as mould, and they're the ones that cause allergies.
Yeah, I've actually got quite
What's that there? Is this likely to have had a back boiler back in the day?
Yeah, it's got a funny pipe, hasn't it?
Probably, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, this one there, metal.
Yeah, I mean, the first house I lived in as a kid had a back boiler. That was
That's the way, wasn't it? In the 50s.
Then, wasn't it?
50s, isn't it?
Yeah.
So the extractor fan is running at 8.8, so it could be better. We'll have a look at it. You might be able to just clean it up. So this fan turns off immediately, you turn the lights off, and actually about 90% of vapours remains in the bathroom after you've moved out. You can see condensation, dribble marks on the wall, and you can see lots of mould. So if you want to keep a bathroom fan downstairs, I would have a continuous flow bathroom fan with a humidistat and light sensitive, so it triggers a higher speed. So it runs about 5 litres a second quietly in the background, and then speeds up to about 15 when you have lots of humidity. Yeah, that's the best way. I have one myself. So we're just after cleaning it, and there's some improvement. The average in this country is about 10, so you're not far off average. So you've got a brick, but it's partially, you've got an air brick, but it's partially blocked up. And you've only got one. Your neighbours have blocked theirs up as well. Interesting. You've only got one. Over there they've got 3. So that's really not enough, and there's no air ventilation there as well. Once you've got the damp sorted out and the subfloor void, just need to monitor the subfloor relative humidity. This is a thermal imaging camera. It shows you where you get the heat loss. And the interesting thing about hygroscopic salts is because they're not a source of water, it's in dynamic equilibrium. That means that there's as much condensation as evaporation. Condensation is being matched by evaporation, so therefore you don't get heat loss from it. Whereas normally things, when they get condensation during the day, they dry out and you get evaporation, so you see a heat signature from them, but you don't with hygroscopic salts. And then if actually I was going to, so I'll look in the bathroom.
Yeah, the bathroom always really, I feel like the bathroom smells of damp.
Yes.
It's quite a strong smell.
Yeah, well, yeah.
We try and keep the window open nose.
If you have a look at here, you get all the heat loss here. So, I mean, I would say that those passive air vents don't do any good at all.
Okay.
It's only when you get a bit of wind outside that they're any benefit. I would personally close it up, put in insulation, and I would probably insulate this wall anyway. And you might think, well, you're going to reduce the vapour in this room, but having long curtains doesn't help.
So you should do it now.
There is an argument for that.
Yeah, I mean, they're not.
I'm guessing they weren't your choice.
No. But, I mean, I think we're probably hopefully nearly past the coldest part.
So I'm just going to talk about the
want a better
subfloor
light?
void. No, I'm looking through the thermal imaging camera. With a subfloor void, if you get any dampness in one zone, it will move through vapour transfer, and so it will move from where the damp is. So it's going to be damp in the corner to the front, near to that block drain, and it's going to just transfer through vapour. So that's why you'll see it here. There's nothing, but there's signs of condensation above the damp-proof course. So it's basically bridging the damp-proof course through the vapour phase. So, it's nothing to do with rising damp, it's the drain.
Okay, the broken drain.
The broken drain to the front. Well, plus the old one to the back, but I'd say the rainwater drain to the front is
So is that one likely to be broken? How do you know it's broken?
I don't, but I know it's blocked, and there's a fair chance it's broken. There are lots of different reasons for believing that, but until it's looked at, you won't be sure.
Are probably right.
Well, the fact that you're not seeing a huge overflow of water and
because ultimately it does soak through that, but you'd suspect it's just falling out.
I'd say some of it's soaking into the property.
Yeah.
But either way, you need to dry the subfloor.
We need to dig that out anyway. So
Yeah.
that, have a look at
I'll
it.
see if I've got a moment. I'll see if I can have a look at it. Yeah.
Mm.
Do you see how?
Oh wow! Yeah. That's
So-
interesting.
So that's because you've got the extra heat loss on the outside. You've got extra surface area, and reduce benefit from air movement on the inside. But at night it will be even more. So typically, so you can't see it on this, but if you look at my other videos, when it's really cold outside, you'll see where the timber support is, and you'll see a different heat profile. And I'll quite often see mould growing either between timber, because it's poorly insulated between the timber, or down the run of the timber because it's well insulated, but the timber's where the heat loss is. But essentially it's the zone of heat loss because relative humidity is higher where the temperature is lower. And it's the surface relative humidity. That's what mould loves. It doesn't like being cleaned away regularly, so.
Okay, that's good to know. It's quite interesting because you can see out.
And you've got the tiling, which is for insulation, but.
Oh yeah. Yeah, is that?
I mean, that's a zone at risk because it's
gosh.
just the heat loss there.
And I've got to take some of that philosophy.
So you can see the heat loss in here. It's up against the wall, and that's because this is external wall. And you, because it's so full of things, you're not getting airflow. But so the primary issue is the vapor, which needs to be dealt with. There's no trickle vents in these. But then the secondary issue is the heat loss, and I would put insulation in a really inexpensive version. So the wool rock, the rock wool that I showed you, or was downstairs I talked about before, is one solution. The great thing about that is that it's white and it's good for painting on and so on. It costs about £50-60 a roll, so it's probably the one to go for. But really cheap. Well, you can get any form of insulation, but I would use wood fibre because it allows it's vapor permeable, which is good. So it doesn't get trapped. Vapor doesn't get trapped in behind, and you can get it it's used for underlay under timber. You can get it at a like B&Q type place. And then you've got it over there, and again that's going to be heat loss. So you've got lots of sticking out bits between the properties. So that's why you're getting it like that. But I have this website damp.ai/detect that I've made using artificial intelligence to pull in and analyze data from data loggers. And if we put the damp wall back reception as the problem area, and then the vapor source, and we're looking at the bathroom in this case, I had the temperature as 12.9 on the 15th at 10 a.m. and then that shows the graph of the relative humidity, the surface relative humidity on that wall. Now this was where the hygroscopic salts were. It's a zone that is being buffered by the hygroscopic salts. So although it is it's relatively high, 80% relative humidity, this is surface relative humidity here, it's not hitting 100%, so you're not getting condensation there. It is true that some of the vapor from the subfloor void is condensing above the damp-proof course and will rise up to some degree. That's exacerbating the problem of the hygroscopic salts. I don't think it's causing them, and the hygroscopic salts themselves are not a source of water. Now, the interesting thing here, well, there are a number of interesting things. One is that the dew point is high, and it's higher than the external temperature, and you should always keep it below the external temperature by increasing use of ventilation, cooking with tops on pots and pans, closing the bathroom door, drying clothes with a dehumidifier, etc., etc. But look at this. This is the bathroom and the rear room relative humidity. Now you see, so this is the dew point differential. Do you see how it spikes downwards, presumably having a shower late on the 13th, and then immediately this high vapour levels in the rear reception. So clearly the bathroom door is being left open and vapour is transferring out. Or maybe it's coming from cooking in the kitchen. You can zoom in and have a better look. But I think this is quite an interesting set. This is midday on the 13th. This here is when I was calibrating the data, so you can ignore that. And there are fewer spikes afterwards, but there still are spikes. But this is very interesting. It looks like the door is being left open of the bathroom, and you're seeing an increase here in the dew point as well. So something to look out for. You can analyze it, and this will tell you the amount of time that Dew's laws was complied with, only 1% of the time. But you know, your bathroom extractor fan isn't working. It's 92% poor according to this, poor ventilation. So have a look at that. Deal with the subfloor vapor, which is caused by the blocked drains. You can bypass them in the short term and have them dug out and relined, and that goes for your neighbour's drain as well. You've got to deal with the penetrating damp and all the excess vapor you're getting around the property.